Back and ready to start botany, right? Yeah. Okay, we got everyone hear me real good? I hope you can. So we got a guest speaker today who's going to talk to you about botany. You've already seen her on the video, Dr. Paula Barton Willis. She's going to, I was telling some people to my misfortune, because now they know the secret of why I'm a lousy teacher. But she's been teaching for a lot of years. I'm not going to say how many. She just retired, but so she's a great teacher, so you'll probably enjoy her lecture more than mine. But she's going to give you a little bit of information, and then we're going to move into the labs. So I'm going to go, or Richard, hit the lights. And anything else you want to tell them about yourself, go for it.
Well, he's a hard act to follow. Actually, in the whole society. And Joe, we graduated together. But Joe has been in the business. You know, he's been a horticulturist for all these years. And I stayed home with my son for 5 years and became a high school AP biology teacher instead of chemistry. So I have more experience teaching, but the botany has always been my first love, and I taught that most of that in my AP bio class anyway. So I hope that if you learn something. Why is it important to know botany? Well, you have to read labels, you have to talk to people, you have to communicate with your agents, and if they tell you to bring in X plant, you might need to identify it, and these are things that will help you identify it. You may learn about how you need to apply something, what part, or what to avoid, and these things will help you. If you plant a certain plant, does it need a pollinator? How do you know where those terms mean when you read them in the catalog? So all those things roll into learning a little bit about botany. Okay, we really are. It may seem like a lot, but really are just scratching the surface. So this is just the odds and ends I thought. When I went back and looked at my own video. I have to take it too, you know. So I looked at my own video. I thought, well, there are a couple things I probably could have gone over a little bit more. So these are just and a couple of terms that may be confusing to some people. Okay, we're going to do the vegetative parts are roots, stems, and leaves. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about those. We'll talk a little bit about flowers. Okay, here is a young root. Okay, you should know something about root structure. Here is a seed leaf, and this is the long root that it first puts out, and you can see the root hairs. Well, the root hairs, that's where the business happens of absorbing. Anything that's absorbed, the only way plants take up minerals is if they're absorbed in water. Those minerals absorbed in water are taken up by these root hairs. And in a larger, I'll show you a picture of a larger root than just an older root. Okay, so here is a little bit more of a larger root. And then this shows you the zones. Down here, you can see this is kind of a schematic of how big these cells would be. This is where the new root cells actually form. Because the root grows from the soil by adding on to this end, adding on, pushing through the soil. Well, your hair grows from your scalp, right? It gets longer. But this doesn't. This grows to be like your hair growing off the ends, right? That's the way a root grows. And so this is where the new cells are formed, the meristematic zone. This is the place of the plant where there's a new cell formed. And then as the root grows, these cells will elongate. So this is already grown, and now we've got the cells that are elongating. They're growing a little bit, stretching out. And then finally, they become differentiated. That just means they're becoming the kind of cell they're going to be. There are many different types of tissue and cells within a root. And so here's where they've already been designated by whatever DNA is turned on with them. Whether they're going to be a root hair, they're going to be an epidermal cell, they're going to be part of the vascular tissue that carries substances up and down. So that's the differentiation zone. You can see, so here's the small cells, they're elongating here, and then here is the mature cells. And it's in this zone here, these two zones is where you'll find the root hairs. They're starting to form here, and then you've got a real good development up in that zone. And here's an older root. It's not a great picture, I apologize for that. This is an older root. Where are the root hairs? Near the ends. So if you've got a tree and you've got a root zone out there, where are most of the absorptions going on? Kind of around the edges, kind of under the drip line of the tree is where most of the root hairs are. They're doing most of the absorption. Right up against the trunk, there's probably not a whole lot of absorption going on. Okay, here is about 30 years ago, when we were in graduate school, longer ago than that, long time ago, but within our lifetime, they realized that there are these fungi, they're called mycorrhizae, and they actually have a companionship with roots. Some of them are just right up against the root and they exchange materials, and some of them will actually go inside the root, and hang out in the soil and exchange materials with the root. And what this does, okay, here is the actual, you can see the root system of the plant right here, and then the mycorrhizal fungus that's attached to it is way out here. So think about how much more soil that plant can take advantage of for water and nutrients. So it's a real advantage, and they're finding more and more and more plants that have this kind of association. It's really beneficial. And here, not only that, but I just want to put this up here because I thought it was so interesting, is okay, here's a plant with mycorrhizae, here's a plant with a mycorrhizal fungus, and then here's another fungus that's attached to both of these. So this plant can actually exchange with this plant through all this system of fungi. Isn't that weird? Okay, stems. Monocots and dicots. I don't know if you remember from the video, but there were several different things that a monocot had to have that were always in monocots. And then one of the things was these vascular tissue. Now these are stem cross sections. You cut a stem and you're just looking down on it. The vascular tissue is what carries materials up and down and all around in the plant. And in dicots, these little bundles of vascular tissue are arranged in a circle around the outer portion of the stem. The xylem is what carries the dissolved water, the minerals dissolved in water up from the roots, and then it carries it to the leaves where most of the photosynthesis is going on, where sugars are made, and then those sugars are loaded back into the phloem, which carries it down and anywhere where all areas of the plant need sugars for energy, especially the roots. So here's the xylem and here's the phloem, and this is some hard tissue, some flares and things like that. But these are the vascular bundles. They're arranged in a circle in a dicot. In a monocot, you can see that they're just scattered all over the place. Okay, kind of a different arrangement on the inside. These big, they call them monocot monkey faces. See that? These big xylem vessels. Okay, so very different, very, very different. So along with having this kind of arrangement of the vascular bundles, you're also going to have a fibrous root system, you're going to have parallel leaves, you're going to have some other things that dicots have, monocots have. It could be monocots, they're called monocots. They have all those things in common. It's not just one thing.
Which one are the xylem and which one's the phloem?
I'm sorry.
In the monocot, where is the xylem and where's the phloem?
The xylem one's on this end, and the phloem is on this end. Most of them are oriented so that the xylem is to the inside, not all of them. But most of them are oriented more toward the xylem being the inside, the phloem being the outside, but this is really scattered. This is a schematic diagram too, so it's probably more like that in real life. But the big ones here are the part of the xylem. The phloem would be here. Okay, so what can happen with dicots? And this is in dicots only, okay? You have what's called secondary growth. Okay, how does a tree start out as a little seedling this big and end up being this big around? Okay, well, it's because we call it secondary growth. What happens is, and this is a young sapling, as it grows, these vascular bundles will fuse together, and all the xylem will form a ring, and all the phloem will form a ring, and this is what you get. So you got, this is the original xylem right here in the middle, and then the xylem will form a ring and start producing more tissue to the inside. The phloem will form a ring and start producing more tissue to the outside. What happens as that happens, the tree gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now all the xylem to the inside, when the tree's mature, all that xylem, most of the xylem on the inside, loses its cell contents and just becomes big pipelines. And the only living xylem is really just out under the bark, still producing more xylem to the inside. The phloem will actually, some of that old phloem will go out there and become part of the bark, and so the living phloem and the living xylem are just right under the bark. The only living tissue in a tree is just right up under the bark. You want to kill a tree, go around and cut about that deep into it all the way around, it's called girdling, and the whole tree will die. Because all the rest of that tissue is already gone, and what's keeping it alive is that tissue that's right under the bark, the vascular tissue. No transport, you can't live, right? You don't get nutrients, you can't get sugars, you can't live. Okay, leaves. This is internal structure. This is a cross-cut of a leaf. Okay, here's the xylem and phloem that have come up from the roots, right? They've come up the stem and now they turned out into a leaf. So here's a vein, or here's a vascular bundle, and here's a vascular bundle. So this is the leaf top, this is the epidermis, that waxy part is on the skin, and this is the bottom. And here you see the stoma, this is where the gases are exchanged for photosynthesis. Okay, and then you notice these are the cells where most of the photosynthesis happens, when they're dark green. That's where most of the chlorophyll is, that's where most of the photosynthesis happens. You really got what they call this spongy mesophyll, because it's kind of fluffy and there's a lot of air spaces in between. But this is where the plant keeps its extra moisture and extra gases, okay, right in here. This is the stomate that they exchange gases. If you leave it open if you leave your mouth open too long, what happens? It dries out, right? The stomate stays open too long, all this moisture from here can not keep, this can't keep up with it, so the plant starts to wilt. The other thing about the horticulture, a little bit of horticulture to me, if you have leaf miners, leaf miners, if you look at a leaf, it looks like there's a trail through it. That's a little insect that's eating right through here. He stays between the two, the top and the bottom, and he just eats all the sensible tissue and makes a trail through the leaf. Flowers, okay? And you'll see this today in one of our samples. I taught the typical flower, right? This is more like the typical flower you'll see if you look in any book. This is the typical flower. It's got hypantheum that the thing sits on, it's got the ovary on the inside, it's got the stamens, and it's got the petals, and it's got the sepals, right? Well, not every flower is exactly like that. There's much variation in the world of plants, especially the flowers, and sometimes that ovary can actually be stuck down in the hypantheum. And sometimes it's way down in here, and this is the stigma, right? The little sticky top that catches the pollen. This is the style, okay, the skinny part. Well, if the ovary is way down here, the stigma still has to be up here to catch pollen. So this style could be this long, all the way down to here, down to that ovary. And you'll see that. I think I talked about that a little bit with corn in the video. Okay, so this is called a superior. It's sitting up. It's superior, to the hypantheum. This is an inferior, but as I said, it can be very inferior. Okay, terms that I think are confusing: perfect and imperfect versus complete and incomplete. Okay, perfect and imperfect talks just about the sexual organs. Okay. It talks about whether it has stamens and pistils, or whether it's just pistils, or whether it has stamens. Okay, so perfect means having both stamens and pistils. If you got them both, you got everything they need, they're perfect. Everything you need for sexual reproduction. You don't really need petals, you don't really need sepals, but you really need the pollen, and you really need a pistil. So if you're perfect, you have both stamens and pistils. If you're imperfect, you're missing one of those. You got staff pistil flowers that just have pistils, or you got stamina flowers that just have stamens. Okay? Anybody think of an example? Anybody know an example of those plants that has flowers like that? Squash. Squash is a real easy one to see. Okay, so that could be important, especially as we talk about the next one. Okay, so perfect means what? It's a sexual organ, right? Pistil or stamens missing. Complete is much simpler. Complete is means it's got all four of the major parts. Sepals, petals, pistil, stamens. If it's missing sepals, it's incomplete. It doesn't tell you whether it's perfect or imperfect, does it? It just knows that it's incomplete. Okay, but if you go back and look at this, is this a perfect flower? No. Is it complete or incomplete? Incomplete is missing one of the four parts, right? So they're not mutually exclusive terms. One can be both. It can be complete or incomplete, and it can be perfect or imperfect. So remember, this perfect, look at these pictures. It's the sexual part, so it makes the difference. Any questions about that? Yes?
For the imperfect ones, will they all be, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Go ahead and say it. If I can't, I'll get it.
Okay. So for imperfect flowers, if say you have a squash, if it only has, say, like male, male reproductive parts, will other flowers have to have female ones so they can
Well,
pollinate,
that
or what
species to
happens?
survive, somewhere there's gotta be the other one, right? There's gotta be the complement to
So
it.
they'd have to grow together.
Let me go to the next slide if you still have a question, because I kind of addressed something like that, okay?
Thank you.
Okay, now we talked about flowers, complete versus incomplete flowers, staminate versus pistil being perfect or imperfect, but this we're talking about plants here, okay, the whole plant. And they're considered monoecious, that's mono means single, right? This means one house, that means plants that have pistillate and staminate flowers on the same plant, or they have perfect flowers. That means they have everything they need on one plant. Whether it's a separate flower or the same flower, they've got everything they need. That's monoecious, one house. Dioecious means it takes two houses for it to happen. Two different plants. One plant has the pistillate flowers, one plant has the staminate flowers. So, is this kind of what you were talking about? Yeah, I thought maybe it was. Okay, plants that have pistillate and staminate flowers are separate plants, like papaya are called dioecious. Okay, so if you have a plant that has only pistillate flowers, it's called pistillate or gynoecious plant, because everything's a pistillate on it. If it's only got stamens on the flowers that are on it, it's called a staminate plant, because it has all male flowers. Okay, here is monoecious. In this case, we've got male and female flowers. Male flower, female flower. But this plant has everything it needs, right? So it's monoecious. This one has perfect flowers, so it's also got everything it needs. So it's also monoecious, one house. And then dioecious, here's all male plants, flowers, and all female flowers, so they have to get together. So it takes two houses to get them. Okay, just a couple of terms. A parth and a carpy. When plants set fruit without being pollinated, no seeds are produced. And we're happy about that with some things, aren't we? I love seedless grapes. Okay? Whereas apomixis is when seeds are produced without pollination. Seeds are produced. Okay, so if something, these are supposed to have seeds, right? Well, what if it produced a seed? Well, that's called apomixis. And some oranges will do that. Even though it's not been pollinated or fertile, it'll still produce nothing. Will they be seeds that you would want to plant? Probably not, because it hasn't really been fertilized. Kind of like ferns are not angiosperms. Ferns is something I didn't talk about at all. Okay, and there was a question on your quiz about it, right? But it wasn't the manual. Okay, so ferns are not angiosperms. I made a big deal in the beginning of talking about angiosperms being flowering plants. You'll never see a flower on a fern naturally. Right? They produce by spores in one generation, and they produce by egg and sperm in another generation. Plants, all plants, have what's called alternation of generation, and you don't have to know about this, and just try to explain it a little bit to you, this is what we know as a fern, right? It produces spores. It's called a sporophyte. It produces a spore. The spore lands somewhere that stays moist, usually under the greenhouse bench or something, and it grows up into this little plant. Or this is called the gametophyte, but okay, it's an adult, okay? And it's part of the fern life cycle. It produces eggs here and sperm down here, which swim up and fertilize the egg, and then out of that will grow a new fern. Now the way we don't propagate, most of the people I know don't propagate ferns like this. They don't make new ferns by doing this. They make new ferns by taking this down here, which is called the rhizomes. Okay, and then collect pieces of that and plant it, and it'll grow into a new fern. You don't ever have to worry about this part. Okay, but this is where the leaves are called fronds. Okay, and this is the rhizome, which it comes from. I have another picture I was going to show you. To talk about that a little bit more. But all of this will ever produce is spores. Okay, here is the rhizome down here. There are true roots. This is called a frond and the blade down the middle. These are the new leaves that unfold, and they're called fiddleheads. And some of them are edible, not all of them. But they unfold like this, come up and make that beautiful fern leaf. Photosynthesis. I taught photosynthesis so much that I would ask my kids a question, and if they didn't know the answer, they would guess photosynthesis. Right. Okay. It's because it's so important. It's like I have told you that all the energy that's in any living thing or ever was in any living thing, including fossil fuels, came through photosynthesis. All the energy that's in living things, that's even in fossil fuels, comes through, it got there through photosynthesis. So it's really, really an interesting thing. Okay, so what do they do? Again, it's not chemistry class, everybody knows these things, okay? Carbon dioxide plus water in the presence of radiant energy, in this case the sun, in the presence of chlorophyll, of course, in the plant. They convert that to sugar in the leaves, and then they also release oxygen as a byproduct. What are they doing with that radiant energy? Well, they're storing it in the bonds of this sugar as chemical energy. Now the energy is in these bonds, okay? And that's where the chemical energy in sugar. So it's taking radiant energy from the sun and turning it into chemical energy. Now, so what happens to these sugars when the plant makes it? They make food just for us? No plant needs food. This is the way that it takes in radiant energy and makes this, and then it can take this and burn it like we do, and get the energy out of it. So, this is just a recap of photosynthesis. Sugars in photosynthesis are loaded into the phloem again, right? They phloem and they're distributed through the plant. Some are burned for cellular energy, and some, they take the carbon backbones in the sugar. If you notice, they have a lot of carbon in it, C6, right? 6 carbons in each one of them. And it breaks them down and then mixes it with those minerals that we pull up from the soil to make other things like DNA, proteins, all those other things that have things besides carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. So it takes them both. Where does the carbon in the plants come from? The plants need come from? The air. Where does everything else come from? The soil. Okay, so the plants have to burn some of that sugar to get their energy to grow and make the molecules that they need, get their enzymes working. Okay, cellular respiration is taking the energy from the sugar and making it into a form that the cell can use. The sugar is like somebody giving you, you live in a small town in Louisiana and somebody paying you in yen. You can't spend it there, right? Well, the cell can't, the plant cell, our cells either can't use sugar directly for energy. So they take that sugar and break it down using, guess what? Oxygen. So the plants use oxygen? Yes, you may have learned in grade school that plants give off oxygen and we give off CO2. That's true, but they do use some oxygen, not nearly as much as they give off, okay? But they have to use that oxygen to burn the sugars. These are both very complicated processes, but it's very interesting. We can simplify them a little bit. They take that chemical energy in sugar and use that energy to put it in ATP. This is like taking your yen and turning it into dollars, something that you can spend. Everything in the cell, from enzymes to whatever, anything that needs energy can get it from the ATP. So what's produced as that? Carbon dioxide and water are the products. It's like if you burn a fossil fuel almost. So does anybody see a relationship between photosynthesis and carbon dioxide? In photosynthesis and cellular respiration, so the one thing. CO2 plus H2O, sugar, oxygen. Sugar, oxygen, CO2, H2O. Say it again. You have it, isn't it? Yeah, they're opposite. They're opposite. What goes in here came out of the other one, right? And what comes out here went into the other one. So this is what you use for photosynthesis. This is what comes out of photosynthesis. So this is the opposite, exactly opposite. Now, the processes are very different. It's not just a backwards process, but the beginning and the end are very opposite. Okay, this is the end of what I was going to tell you about the actual body. But just to draw your attention, and you don't have to look at these pages right now, but there are lots of figures in your book that have different arrangements of the flowers on the stem, different types of leaves, different leaf shapes that are very, very important in learning how to identify a plant. And you may have to do that at some point. And so to be able to use it, you learn those terms and use them will be beneficial to you in your master gardening. because you're going to be communicating with agents, you're going to be communicating with people that you meet at festivals, or people that just want to talk to you because you're the master gardener. You're going to be looking at labels on pesticides. You're going to be looking at all these things. So to learn a little bit of botany is a really helpful thing. Thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes.
So going back to the full male, full female flower, let's say on a squash line. For example, this spring I planted a vine and it was all male flowers. How do I know next time? Is it just like a matter of just like?
Well, this is a horticulture question, and Joe, where's Dr. Joe?
Oh,
Anna. I think it's been our experience that they produce the male flowers first.
Yes,
And then you start to get some good female flowers. And you tell them because the ovary, you can actually see the little squash.
Yeah.
On the female flower before you can actually tell it's going to be a little squash before it's ever pollinated.
Okay.
yeah, they do that to attract the pollinators in early on, and then they don't waste as much energy on female flowers and embryonic fruit that might not ever mature. So the males always show up first on cucumbers, squash, pumpkins, and then the females come later and you get fewer males.
Anybody else? Okay, we have 2 labs we're going to do. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is a dissection. Ooh, a frog, right? No.
Wrong class.
We're going to dissect flowers. Okay, you're going to each 2 people is going to dissect a flower. And so you'll be given the materials to do that with. And guys, if you want to start handing that out, that would be great. You'll be given now remember, those little purple flowers? Joe, show them where the ovary is and those little purple flowers so they don't cut it off.
You can't hear you.
Somebody will.
Here, I'll get him.
But there are instructions on your dissection sheet. There are different parts. You put them in groups, like on the staples, or the petals, or the groups of label them. And then there are a couple questions at the top. Okay. Thank you.
Some of them, they don't have, where they come all the way back in here. Because that's where that pod happens.
Oh gosh, these are too far gone, I think. Look, I'm gonna go look and see what we got. I'll take it.
I'm looking right at it.
Needles and scales.
Don't be afraid to get your 10X lens out, the little lens that you got in your pack, so you can maybe see the ovules inside the ovary.
Ooh, this thing is sharp.
Yep, be careful. Very sharp.
The stigma is almost unrecognizable. It's just almost like a grain of sand at the top of the style. Okay, that's fine. This is well, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Look at that little. It's all the way down there.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You don't even know it's there.
Take all the stamens and put them together and label them. Take the pistil and
Okay.
label them.
Okay.
You want to group your parts and label them, and there's
Oh,
two
yeah, you
questions.
got yours really nicely done. It looks very good.
Well, it looks like an incomplete flower, unless, wait a minute.
She was able to find some.
See what that is right there? There might be something there. Let's see. Okay, oh boy, let's see. Wait, you put this close to your eye, I
Yep, you
guess.
can either do it close to your eye or hold it up to the thing.
Well, oh, that works a little better. So there is something there.
What about if you follow these structures down? Where do they go?
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that's why it was tricky.
Wow! Look at that. Okay, so then what's in there? Are there ovules
Yep, that's the ovary.
in there?
You wouldn't even know they're there.
That's wild. That is very cool. All right, so now I should try to take that out.
Yeah, you can use your razor to kind of dig it out of there, or this
little
little
pokey thing.
yeah, your little pokey guy in the tweezers.
This is kind of like,
It's better than a frog.
it's much better. I hated that lab.
I hated it too.
Oh my gosh, it was, I could not, I thought the frog was so beautiful. I thought it was the most horrible thing to do. I won't even, so I kissed it, I started to.
Right.
It's not as bad as the dog lab in medical school.
Oh yeah, we had to do fetal.
Because if you see here, then there's style.
At least they haven't lived yet, but
That's cool. Like early on.
it was but they took beautiful live dogs. Anyway, let's think about these beautiful
Look at
flowers.
this beautiful flower.
Right.
Freedom lily. So you can actually kind of see how it's in there.
I can't neither of them have the same.
Oh, look at that. It is coming out.
Yeah, there you go.
There is one lab that I will.
That would go down there. See, that would go all the way down there. and
Yes, I
attach.
noticed it.
There's the
Oh,
other
okay,
one.
yes. So I cut that off when
So
I
the
cut
pollen
open the
has to
flower.
grow all the way down.
I see. All the way down there, my God. It's crazy.
So these are looking great.
It's perfect to me.
It's very perfect.
The little filaments that they're attached to.
Yeah.
But it's hard to see.
I actually can see some ovules.
Yeah.
You see, just on this side of the middle, you can actually see. See how it looks kind of granular in there? Each one of those granular parts is actually an ovule.
Yeah, that's very
Look, put the thing up to your eye, put it up to your eye, and then hold the flower so that you can see.
Good question,
I
though.
think they have one of those.
Yep, each table.
So this is an example up here of how you use the dichotomous key. Right? Okay? So we're going to use the key to find out who he is, right? So this is going to ask you, he's going to ask you two questions, like dichotomous in twos. The questions come in twos. Does he have glasses on his eyes or glasses not on his eyes? You have to make an observation. You have to look at it, right? Not on his eyes. So go to 2, right? So 2A says shirt blue or green or shirt red and orange. Green. So we go to 3, okay? 3 says beard present or beard not present or beard present? Beard present. So what does it tell me to do? Go to 4. And then I go to 4 and it says beard braided or beard not braided. And that leads us to Julius. Okay. So this is going to how a key is set up. And it may not tell you to go from 1 to 2 to 3. It may tell you to go to 4 right away because you skip this other stuff and get ahead of the game. Okay. So that's what that, and it's really important, again, to know your plants. I collected plants for an artist up in Baton Rouge who came to paint the floor of Louisiana for LSU. and they asked me to go get a plant, I wanted to be sure that I brought back the right plant. Well, you may not have a situation like that, but there are times when you really need to know what something is. And this is the official scientific way to do it, to use it for dichotomous key. We have a bunch of leaves at each table, and you've been given a key. So you're supposed to use these leaves, which are not actually this is just an exercise for you. You don't take this out in the woods and try to use it to identify all the trees. It's not going to happen. But it was made for you, and flowers are really the best thing to use in identifying plants. But if you don't have flowers, you use leaves. So there are questions there, and there's some pictures in your manual that will help you identify the different parts. Joe has an example of what we use in Louisiana of a huge key that you can identify just about any plant you find in the woods. It's called the Florida of the Carolinas, but it works really well for Louisiana. So if you want to come up and take a look at that at some point.
This is one big dichotomous key. So going through this book, it'll always give you two choices. You got to follow one that's true, one that's false, and then it'll tell you where to go next.
But you don't end up going through the whole book. Don't think that. Okay? Don't think that halfway through and another half. You jump real quick through it.
Yes, as opposed to talking about these stuff.
Okay, a lot of people use field guides. You get the color flowers and what have, but that's not nearly as accurate as using this. Depends on what you're trying to do. Everybody uses field guides in some way.
They all have a number on them.
Well,
You gotta pick a leaf and
Yeah, I was wondering about that, looking at it.
table, kind of spread them out, and one person identify one number, and everyone just agree that they're going to go along with whatever that person keys it to, and the whole table can probably finish this exercise easily in 10 minutes then.
Understand if it's it's more than 3 millimeters. So where do I go then if it's more than?
then you go to 4.
How do you know that?
Because it says leaves more than 4 millimeters, go to 4.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just looking at that one. Let's go to 4. This is 4. Okay, okay.
Now you have two choices
Leaves
there,
opposite or
one or the other.
They're the same.
So they're opposite each other.
Opposite? Okay.
Do you think so?
I don't
What's
think they're
the leaf?
opposite.
What is the leaf?
The whole thing is a leaf.
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
Right. So you're looking the leaflets.
Ah.
So now, since you know those are leaflets, leaves and leaflets might have different arrangements. So what is the arrangement of the leaves?
Opposite.
Are they? Opposite means they are
Directly across from each
directly
other.
across from each other. Are those directly across?
No, they are not.
Right.
So their world,
Just for a second.
go to 5.
No.
No?
So you have to say, are the leaves opposite or whirled? Yes or no?
Remind you guys about
Oh,
No. So are the leaves alternate?
Okay, is this a leaf?
yes.
Yes. So you forget all of this and now go what this one tells you to
7.
go to. Number 7.
The axillary
And you have two
buds.
number 7s to choose from.
Okay.
One of them's true, one of them's false.
No, there are not.
Okay, leaves simple and leaves compound.
They
Well,
keep going down, down, down until they find an axillary bud. And guess what? There's my axillary bud. Every
she has-
north of the axillary bud is a leaf together. So what kind of leaf is this? Simple or compound? Compound. Good. So look for that axillary bud to tell if you have a compound leaf or not.
I need to find a.
Axillary bud. So that's a leaf. Simple.
So what are you supposed to do? Identify the leaf and write it down?
4, 6, 7. Somebody's not counting very
Well, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed, honestly, so.
You want me to leave? Am I doing too much?
Yeah, well, you're just doing all of it. They're simple. So that would be this.
You need to be doing it. Leaves flattened or feather-like. Okay, not bad. That's right.
pinnate means all the little leaflets are attached at the same place, just like if you look at the bone on your fingers, all of them are attached here, so that's palmate. If it was pinnate, it's like a feather. There's one main stem, and all the leaves come off, leaflets come off like this. Okay, that's pinnate.
You know, a lot of Anna, do you know?
Huh?
Do you remember what they make the tea from Vitex is supposed to be good for?
I don't remember what it's good for. It might be like a diuretic. That seems
So good. I never did the lab.
That's a tiny little, it was very different than the other one. Okay, that makes me feel better. So now I'm happy.
What was there?
All right. So
And
then,
now, do you know it? You do know that it's a simple leaf, and then
right,
okay.
and then pinnately veined.
Yes.
Walking my dogs this morning saying, simple leaf, pinnately veined. All right, so leaf simple 8. How do you all flatten their wing like? That's kind of flattened.
Really? I would say that's definitely round.
Round?
Flattened would be, it looks like this. I mean, really.
Oh, real flat.
Flat.
Okay.
That is
I was
flat.
looking at how this seemed flatter than the bottom part. But okay, so the petal is not flat, so that's 9. Leaves pinnately veined 10. Leaf margins use magnolia. Thank you.
You're welcome.